What if I told you that the homeless man you ignored yesterday could buy your entire company tomorrow? What if the person you judge by their torn clothes holds more power than everyone who mocked them combined? What if one moment of cruelty could cost you everything you've worked for? This is the story of Marcus Chen, a billionaire tech mogul who learned that sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. And sometimes, justice has a way of serving itself cold. Marcus had been working for 72 hours straight in his private laboratory, developing breakthrough technology that would revolutionize renewable energy forever. His clothes were stained with motor oil and chemical residue, his hair disheveled from sleepless nights of innovation. He looked exactly like what society fears most, someone who doesn't belong. But Marcus needed a specific component for his prototype, something only available at Pinnacle Electronics, the city's most exclusive tech boutique. The store catered to wealthy clients, celebrities, and corporate executives who spent thousands on the latest gadgets like pocket change. As Marcus approached the gleaming glass doors, he caught his reflection and almost laughed at the irony. Here he was, worth more than most small countries' GDP, looking like he hadn't seen a shower in weeks. The moment Marcus stepped inside, conversations stopped. Customers in designer suits and luxury watches turned to stare, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disgust in seconds. The pristine white floors seemed to amplify every sound his worn boots made as he walked toward the component section. "Excuse me, sir." The voice belonged to Derek Thompson, the store's head of security, a man who took pride in keeping undesirables away from paying customers. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Marcus looked up from the display case he was examining, his tired eyes meeting Derek's hostile stare. "I'm just looking for a specific microprocessor. It'll only take a minute." "Look, buddy, this isn't a charity case. Our customers pay premium prices for a premium experience. Your presence here is making people uncomfortable." Derek's voice carried across the store, ensuring everyone could hear the public humiliation being delivered. A woman in pearls whispered loudly to her companion, "How did security let him in? This is exactly why I shop at exclusive stores, to avoid this kind of situation." Marcus remained calm, reaching into his torn jacket pocket. "I have money. I can pay for what I need." Derek's laugh was sharp and mocking. "What are you going to pay with? Food stamps? Listen, the component you're looking at costs $8,000. That's probably more than you've seen in your entire life." The store manager, Jennifer Walsh, appeared beside Derek, her designer heels clicking authoritatively on the marble floor. She had built her reputation on maintaining Pinnacle Electronics' exclusive atmosphere, and this situation threatened everything she stood for. "Sir, I'm going to have to insist you leave immediately. If you don't comply, we'll be forced to call the police." Jennifer's voice was ice cold, calculated to cause maximum embarrassment. Other customers had stopped their shopping entirely, some pulling out phones to record what they assumed would be an amusing confrontation with a homeless person who didn't know his place. Marcus pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, the only cash he had in his pocket. "This is all I have on me right now, but I can transfer the rest digitally. I really need that component." The laughter that erupted from the crowd was cruel and sharp. A teenager with his wealthy parents pointed openly, saying, "Mom, look at this guy. He thinks $20 can buy something here." Derek stepped closer, his hand moving to Marcus's shoulder with practiced aggression. "That's it. You're trespassing now. Either walk out on your own, or I'll help you find the exit." Marcus felt the firm grip on his shoulder, the eyes of 30 strangers watching his humiliation unfold like entertainment. For a moment, he considered revealing who he was, showing them the platinum cards in his wallet, the business cards that would make their jaws drop. But something stopped him. Maybe it was curiosity about how far they would go, or maybe it was the scientist in him conducting an experiment on human nature. Either way, he decided to let this play out naturally. "Please, don't touch me. I'll leave." Marcus's voice remained steady, but observers could hear the exhaustion and disappointment threading through his words. As he walked toward the exit, The crowd's murmurs followed him like a wave of judgment. "Probably on drugs," someone whispered. "These people have no shame," added another. Jennifer Walsh called out loudly enough for everyone to hear, "And don't come back unless you can afford to shop here like a civilized person." The automatic doors closed behind Marcus with a soft hiss, sealing him out of their world of privilege and prejudice. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking back at the gleaming store that had just rejected him so completely. 24 hours later, Marcus stood in his penthouse bathroom, steam rising from the marble shower as he prepared for what would become the most satisfying day of his business career. His reflection showed a completely different person. Designer suit tailored perfectly to his frame, silver hair styled immaculately, the quiet confidence that comes with unlimited resources. His assistant, Sarah, knocked on the bedroom door. "Mr. Chen, the legal team has finished the paperwork. Pinnacle Electronics is officially yours as of this morning. The previous owners accepted your offer immediately. Apparently, $200 million was too tempting to refuse." Marcus smiled as he adjusted his platinum watch. The same hands that had been stained with oil yesterday now adorned with accessories worth more than most people's homes. "And the staff? They don't know about the ownership change yet?" "Correct, sir. As you requested, we've kept the transition completely confidential. They think today is just another normal business day." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. While he had been developing technology that could solve global energy crises, these people had been worried about maintaining their exclusive shopping bubble. While he had been working to make the world better, they had been perfecting the art of making people feel smaller. The black Bugatti Chiron pulled up to Pinnacle Electronics with the quiet authority that only 8-figure cars possess. Marcus stepped out, his Italian leather shoes touching the same sidewalk where he had been humiliated exactly 24 hours earlier. This time, the doorman practically sprinted to open the entrance for him, recognizing the signs of serious wealth from 50 feet away. The same customers who had laughed yesterday now nodded respectfully as he passed, their instincts immediately calibrated to his obvious status. Derek Thompson was positioned near the entrance, his practiced eye scanning for potential troublemakers, when he saw Marcus approaching the same display case from yesterday. Something about the man seemed familiar, but the expensive suit and confident demeanor didn't match his memory. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you find anything specific today?" Derek's voice carried the obsequious tone reserved for customers whose single purchase could cover his monthly salary. Marcus turned slowly, his eyes meeting Derek's with calm intensity. "Actually, yes. I'm looking for the same component I needed yesterday. The $8,000 microprocessor." Recognition hit Derek like a physical blow. The face was the same, but everything else about this man screamed wealth and power. His mind raced, trying to reconcile the homeless person from yesterday with the obviously wealthy client standing before him. I'm not sure I understand, sir." Marcus's smile was patient but deadly. "Yesterday, you told me I couldn't afford to shop here. You said $8,000 was more than I'd seen in my entire life. You physically removed me from this store while customers recorded my humiliation for their entertainment." The color drained from Derek's face as the full weight of his mistake began to sink in. Other staff members started to notice the tension, and customers began paying attention to what was clearly becoming a significant confrontation. Jennifer Walsh appeared with her usual authority, but her confidence wavered when she saw Marcus's expensive attire and the fear in Derek's eyes. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen? Miss Walsh, isn't it?" Marcus's voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to boardroom negotiations worth billions. "Yesterday, you told me not to return unless I could afford to shop here like a civilized person. You threatened to call police on me for the crime of looking poor while needing to make a purchase." Jennifer's practiced composure cracked as she recognized the man she had publicly humiliated. Her mind immediately began calculating the potential lawsuit, the social media backlash, the career-ending consequences of discriminating against someone who was clearly wealthy enough to destroy her professionally. "Sir, I think there might have been some misunderstanding yesterday. Perhaps we could discuss this privately in my office." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No misunderstanding. Your staff judged me entirely on my appearance, treated me as less than human, and removed me from your store while customers laughed and recorded the incident. You made your judgment publicly, so let's resolve this publicly." The store had grown quiet, with every customer and employee straining to hear what was clearly becoming a dramatic confrontation. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket, the same motion that had produced a crumpled $20 bill yesterday. This time, he pulled out a legal document bearing the Pinnacle Electronics letterhead and official seals. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to make an announcement." Marcus's voice carried easily across the suddenly silent store. "As of this morning, I am the new owner of Pinnacle Electronics. I purchased this establishment for $200 million, which I suppose proves I can afford to shop here." The silence that followed was deafening. Customers stared in shock, some recognizing Marcus now as the tech billionaire they had seen in business magazines. Others were simply processing the impossible reversal of fortune they were witnessing. Jennifer Walsh felt her legs weaken as the full implications hit her. Not only had she discriminated against a customer, she had discriminated against her new boss, someone with the power to end her career with a single decision. Derek stood frozen, his mind replaying every cruel word he had spoken, every moment of unnecessary humiliation he had inflicted on the man who now controlled his livelihood. "Mr. Thompson," Marcus continued, his voice still calm but carrying unmistakable authority, "you told me yesterday that my presence made customers uncomfortable. Today, I'm informing you that your employment here makes me uncomfortable. You're terminated immediately." Derek's mouth opened and closed silently, the words he wanted to say trapped by the complete reversal of power. Yesterday, he had been the authority figure, the one who decided who belonged and who didn't. Today, he was discovering what it felt like to be judged and found wanting. "Miss Walsh," Marcus turned to the trembling store manager, "yesterday, you questioned my right to be here based solely on my appearance. You made assumptions about my worth, my character, and my place in society without knowing anything about me except what I looked like." Jennifer nodded miserably, knowing that any attempt at explanation would only make things worse. "I'm not going to fire you, Miss Walsh. Instead, I want you to think about yesterday every time you see someone who doesn't meet your standard of acceptable appearance. I want you to remember that worth isn't measured by clothing, and dignity isn't determined by bank account balances." Marcus addressed the entire store, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had experienced both sides of society's judgment. Everyone here learned something yesterday, whether they realize it or not. You learned that it's acceptable to laugh at someone else's misfortune, to judge people by their appearance, to treat fellow human beings as entertainment. The customers who had recorded his humiliation now stared at their phones in horror, realizing they had documented their own participation in something deeply shameful. "I could sue this establishment for discrimination. I could destroy careers and reputations with a few phone calls, but instead, I want this to be a lesson for everyone who witnessed yesterday's events." Marcus walked slowly through the store, examining the same products he had been denied access to 24 hours earlier. Each step was measured, deliberate, allowing the full weight of the reversal to sink in for everyone present. "The component I needed yesterday? It was for a prototype that will revolutionize renewable energy technology. While you were worried about maintaining your exclusive shopping environment, I was working on solutions that could help save our planet's future." He paused at the display case containing the microprocessor, the same item that had started this entire confrontation. "The irony is that I didn't actually need this component after all. My team found an alternative solution while I was being humiliated on your sales floor." A young customer, probably college age, stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, I recorded what happened yesterday. I posted it on social media. I thought it was funny." Marcus looked at the young man, seeing genuine remorse in his eyes. "What's your name?" "Tyler, sir." Tyler Morrison. Tyler, what did you learn from posting that video? The young man's voice was barely a whisper. That I was wrong. That I was cruel. That I participated in something horrible without thinking about the person we were hurting. Marcus nodded approvingly. Tyler, you've learned more in this moment than many people learn in a lifetime. The fact that you can acknowledge your mistake and feel genuine remorse shows character that wasn't visible yesterday. He addressed the gathered crowd again, his tone becoming more philosophical. Every day, each of us makes split-second judgments about the people we encounter. We decide who deserves respect, who belongs in our spaces, who is worth our consideration. These judgments reveal more about our character than they ever will about the people we're judging. Jennifer Walsh found her voice finally, though it shook with emotion. Mr. Chen, I am deeply sorry for yesterday. There's no excuse for how we treated you. I allowed my prejudices and my desire to maintain what I thought was an exclusive atmosphere to override basic human decency. Miss Walsh, your apology is noted and appreciated, but apologies mean nothing without changed behavior. I'm implementing new policies immediately. No customer will ever be judged by their appearance again. No human being will be treated as less than welcome in this establishment based on their clothing, their accent, their apparent economic status, or any other superficial characteristic. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call that everyone could hear. Sarah, please transfer $50,000 to the homeless shelter downtown. Tell them it's from someone who learned the value of dignity the hard way. The transformation in the store's atmosphere was palpable. Customers who had been eager to watch someone else's humiliation were now confronting their own capacity for cruelty. Staff members were realizing how their learned behaviors had contributed to systematic discrimination. An elderly woman approached Marcus tentatively. Sir, I owe you an apology as well. I said terrible things about you yesterday, made assumptions that were cruel and wrong. I've been shopping here for 20 years, and I never questioned whether other people might be excluded from spaces I took for granted. Marcus shook her hand gently. Mrs. Henderson, Margaret Henderson. Mrs. Henderson, the fact that you can recognize and acknowledge your part in yesterday's events shows tremendous character. Most people would prefer to forget their mistakes rather than learn from them. Tyler, the young man who had posted the video, spoke up again. Mr. Chen, I've deleted the video from all my social media accounts, but I was wondering, would it be okay if I shared this story instead? The lesson you've taught us today? Marcus considered the request carefully. Tyler, if you share this story, share all of it. Share the part where you laughed at someone else's pain, and share the part where you recognized that laughter was wrong. Real growth requires acknowledging our failures, not just celebrating our eventual understanding. Marcus walked to the center of the store, commanding attention without raising his voice. I'm making several immediate changes to how this business operates. First, we will implement sensitivity training for all staff members. Second, we will establish a policy that no customer is ever to be judged or treated differently based on their appearance. He paused, looking directly at each employee. Third, this store will donate 10% of its monthly profits to organizations that help people experiencing homelessness, poverty, and discrimination. If we're going to profit from exclusivity, we need to actively work against the harm that exclusivity causes. Jennifer Walsh nodded eagerly, seeing a path toward redemption. Mr. Chen, I would like to personally oversee the implementation of these changes. Yesterday's events have forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself and the culture I've helped create here. Oh, Miss Walsh, I'm giving you that opportunity because I believe people can change when they truly understand the impact of their actions. But understand that this is your chance to prove that yesterday's behavior was an aberration, not your character. Derek Thompson, still present despite his termination, stepped forward. Mr. Chen, I know I have no right to ask this, but I wondered if there might be any way to… I realize now how wrong I was. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to find a way to make amends. Marcus studied Derek's face carefully, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus mere regret at getting caught. "Mr. Thompson, yesterday you told me that $20 was probably more than I'd seen in my entire life. You used your position of authority to humiliate someone you perceived as powerless. Why should I believe your regret is genuine rather than simply fear of consequences?" Derek's answer came slowly, thoughtfully. "Because last night after I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about how it would feel to be treated the way I treated you. I called my sister, who works with homeless veterans, and asked her to tell me about the people she serves. I learned that many of them are more educated, more experienced, more honorable than I am. They just had different luck, different circumstances." The honesty in Derek's voice seemed to resonate with Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, I'm going to give you a choice. You can accept your termination and find employment elsewhere, hopefully carrying yesterday's lesson with you. Or you can work for minimum wage at the homeless shelter I just donated to, learning firsthand about the dignity and worth of people society has written off." Derek's response was immediate. "The shelter, sir. I need to understand the people I've been trained to exclude." The crowd murmured appreciatively at this unexpected turn. Justice was being served, but with an opportunity for genuine redemption rather than simple punishment. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward again. "Mr. Chen, I would like to make a donation to that shelter as well. Yesterday, I was part of a crowd that laughed at your pain. Today, I want to be part of a community that prevents such pain." Other customers began speaking up, offering donations, sharing their own stories of times they had been judged unfairly, acknowledging moments when they had participated in excluding others. Tyler pulled out his phone again. "Mr. Chen, instead of just sharing this story, what if I created a campaign, something that encourages people to examine their own prejudices, to treat others with dignity regardless of appearance?" Marcus smiled genuinely for the first time since entering the store. "Tyler, that's exactly the kind of positive action that can come from acknowledging our mistakes. But remember, the goal isn't to make yourself feel better about yesterday. The goal is to prevent yesterday from happening to other people." A middle-aged businessman in an expensive suit approached hesitantly. "Sir, I have a confession. I shop here specifically because I thought it kept me away from people I considered beneath me. Yesterday I laughed at your situation because it reinforced my sense of superiority. I'm realizing now that what I thought was class was actually just cruelty." Marcus addressed the businessman's honesty with respect. "Sir, you've just demonstrated more class in this moment of honest reflection than you did in all your expensive shopping trips combined. True elegance comes from how we treat people who can do nothing for us, not from how much we spend on ourselves." He looked around the store at the faces of people genuinely grappling with their behavior and beliefs. Everyone here is learning something that should have been taught in childhood, that every human being deserves basic dignity and respect, regardless of their circumstances or appearance. Jennifer Walsh had been taking notes throughout the conversation. "Mr. Chen, I want to document all of these policy changes and the reasoning behind them. I think this could become a model for other businesses, a way to actively combat discrimination rather than just avoiding lawsuits." Miss Walsh, that's an excellent idea. But remember that policies are only as good as the people who implement them. The real change has to happen in hearts and minds, not just employee handbooks. Marcus walked over to the microprocessor display one more time. "Yesterday, I was denied access to this component because you judged my worth by my appearance. Today, I don't need the component, but I'm going to buy it anyway. Not because I need it, but because sometimes the act of purchasing something represents more than a transaction." Marcus picked up the microprocessor, the same item that had started this entire confrontation. This $8,000 component represents more than its technical specifications. It represents the assumption that appearance determines ability, that clothing indicates character, that visible wealth equals human worth. He walked to the checkout counter, where a nervous cashier waited to process what would certainly be the most significant transaction of her career. I'm purchasing this not because I need it, but as a reminder that every person who enters this store deserves the opportunity to buy anything they want, provided they can pay for it legally. The cashier, a young woman named Maria, spoke quietly. Mr. Chen, I witnessed everything yesterday. I wanted to speak up, to tell my colleagues that what they were doing was wrong, but I was afraid of losing my job. I've been thinking about that cowardice all night. Marcus handed her his platinum card. Maria, courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is doing the right thing despite fear. Tomorrow, you'll have another chance to demonstrate courage when someone else is being treated unfairly. As the transaction processed, Marcus continued addressing the assembled crowd. This purchase represents a commitment to the principle that this store will serve all customers with equal dignity. The price I'm paying today is small compared to the price we all paid yesterday in lost humanity. Tyler had been recording the conversation with Marcus's permission, preparing to share a very different kind of story than the one he had posted yesterday. Mr. Chen, what would you want people to take away from this situation? Mrs. Henderson raised her hand like a student in class. Mr. Chen, how do we make sure we remember this lesson when the emotional impact of today fades? Mrs. Henderson, that's perhaps the most important question anyone has asked. Sustained change requires constant vigilance against our own prejudices. It requires actively looking for opportunities to extend dignity to people society has taught us to ignore or exclude. The businessman who had confessed his classist attitudes spoke up again. Sir, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I don't even know how to interact with people from different economic backgrounds. I've spent so much time in exclusive circles that I've lost the ability to see people as individuals rather than economic categories. Marcus's response carried the wisdom of someone who had experienced life from multiple perspectives. Sir, the solution is simpler than you might think. Start by remembering that every person you meet has dreams, fears, talents, and struggles just like you do. Economic circumstances don't change fundamental human nature. He gestured around the store. Everyone here yesterday made the same mistake. They assumed that external circumstances reflect internal worth. They forgot that temporary conditions don't define permanent character. Maria, the cashier, had finished processing the transaction and handed Marcus his receipt. Mr. Chen, this receipt shows more than a purchase. For me, it represents proof that people can change, that mistakes don't have to define us forever. Marcus smiled at her insight. Maria, you understand something that many people never learn. Redemption is always possible, but it requires acknowledging our mistakes and committing to better behavior. Derek Thompson, preparing to leave for his new position at the homeless shelter, approached one final time. Mr. Chen, I want to thank you for showing me who I really was yesterday and who I might become tomorrow. I don't think I would have learned this lesson any other way. Mr. Thompson, sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in the most painful packages. Use yesterday's pain to fuel tomorrow's compassion. As word of the morning's events began to spread, other businesses in the area started calling Pinnacle Electronics, wanting to understand what had happened and what changes were being implemented. The story was becoming larger than one store, one confrontation, one lesson. Jennifer Walsh fielded these calls with growing confidence, explaining the new policies and the reasoning behind them. What we learned today is that true luxury isn't about exclusion. It's about making everyone feel valued and respected. Tyler had been working on his social media campaign, showing Marcus drafts of posts that encouraged people to examine their own prejudices. Mr. Chen, I want to make sure this message reaches as many people as possible, but I also want to make sure it's authentic, not just performative. Tyler, authenticity comes from continued action, not just initial enthusiasm. The real test of this campaign will be whether it changes behavior 6 months from now, not whether it gets attention today. The elderly Mrs. Henderson had been speaking with other customers about forming a group to volunteer at homeless shelters and food banks. Mr. Chen, we want to turn yesterday's shame into today's service. Would you be willing to help us organize meaningful volunteer opportunities? Marcus was moved by the genuine desire for positive change he was witnessing. Mrs. Henderson, I think that's a beautiful way to honor the lesson you learned, but remember, the goal is to serve others, not to make yourselves feel better about past behavior. As the morning progressed, Marcus began outlining his long-term vision for Pinnacle Electronics and its role in the community. This store will become a model for how businesses can actively combat discrimination while still maintaining excellence in customer service. He addressed the remaining staff members, most of whom had witnessed the entire transformation. Your jobs here now carry additional responsibility. You're not just selling products, you're demonstrating that respect and dignity can coexist with commercial success. Jennifer Walsh had been taking comprehensive notes throughout the morning. Mr. Chen, I'd like to propose that we document this entire process and share it with other business owners. This could become a case study in corporate social responsibility. Ms. Walsh, that's an excellent idea, but remember that the goal isn't to gain recognition for doing what should have been standard practice all along. The goal is to prevent other people from experiencing what happened here yesterday. Maria, the cashier, had been quietly observing the transformation of her workplace. Mr. Chen, this feels like working somewhere completely different from yesterday. The energy, the purpose, even the way customers are interacting with each other. Everything has changed. Marcus nodded approvingly. Maria, what you're feeling is the difference between a business that serves customers and a business that serves humanity. When we treat people with genuine respect, it transforms the entire environment. As the day progressed, Marcus prepared to leave Pinnacle Electronics, knowing that the real test of everything that had happened would come in the days and weeks ahead, when the emotional impact of the morning began to fade and people had to choose whether to maintain their new perspectives. Tyler approached with his completed social media campaign. Mr. Chen, I finished the posts about examining our prejudices and treating others with dignity, but I'm nervous about sharing my own story, about admitting how cruel I was yesterday. Tyler, that nervousness you're feeling is your conscience working properly. The fact that you're uncomfortable with your past behavior means you've genuinely grown. Share your story honestly, both the mistake and the lesson. Mrs. Henderson had organized a group of customers to begin volunteering at local shelters, with Derek Thompson agreeing to help coordinate their efforts. Mr. Chen, we want to make sure we're approaching this service with the right attitude. How do we avoid making this about ourselves rather than the people we're trying to help? Marcus's response reflected deep understanding of human nature. Mrs. Henderson, the moment you start feeling good about your volunteer work, stop and refocus on the people you're serving. True service requires constant vigilance against self-congratulation. As Marcus walked toward the exit, the same doors that had closed behind him in humiliation 24 hours earlier, he turned to address everyone one final time. The store was quieter now, but filled with a different energy. The energy of people who had been fundamentally changed by witnessing true justice and mercy in action. Everyone here learned something today about the power of assumptions and the danger of judging others. But the real question is what you'll do with that knowledge tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Jennifer Walsh stepped forward, her voice carrying newfound authority and purpose. Mr. Chen, I want to assure you that the changes we've implemented today will be permanent. This store will never again exclude anyone based on appearance or perceived economic status. Derek Thompson, preparing for his new role at the shelter, offered his final words. Mr. Chen, yesterday, I thought my job was to protect customers from people I considered undesirable. Today, I understand that my real job should have been protecting human dignity from people like yesterday's version of myself. Maria, the cashier who had processed the symbolic purchase, spoke with quiet conviction. Mr. Chen, every transaction I process from now on will remind me that every customer deserves respect, regardless of what they're buying or what they look like while buying it. As Marcus finally walked through those doors, this time with dignity intact and justice served, he reflected on the unexpected lesson he had learned alongside everyone else. He had entered this situation intending to purchase a component for his prototype. Instead, he had purchased something far more valuable: the opportunity to transform hearts, minds, and institutional practices. Tyler posted his social media campaign that evening, sharing both his shameful behavior from yesterday and the transformative lesson from today. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of people sharing their own stories of times they had judged others unfairly and committing to more conscious, compassionate behavior in the future. Mrs. Henderson's volunteer group grew rapidly as word spread about their mission to serve those society often overlooks. Derek Thompson's transition to working with homeless individuals became a model for how people can transform prejudice into service, fear into understanding. Jennifer Walsh implemented the promised changes at Pinnacle Electronics, but more than that, she began speaking at business conferences about creating inclusive environments without sacrificing commercial success. The store became a case study in corporate transformation, proving that treating people with dignity actually enhanced rather than hindered business operations. The story of what happened at Pinnacle Electronics spread far beyond the immediate participants, becoming a touchstone for conversations about prejudice, dignity, and the power of second chances. But the most important impact wasn't in the headlines or social media posts. It was in the daily interactions of people who had learned to see beyond surface appearances. Marcus never needed to publicly reveal his identity or his wealth to teach the lesson that day. The transformation came not from his money, but from his willingness to turn a moment of personal humiliation into an opportunity for collective growth. He proved that true power lies not in the ability to punish, but in the wisdom to educate and the grace to forgive. The component he purchased that day was never used in his laboratory. Instead, it sits in his office as a reminder that the most valuable things we acquire are often not the things we thought we needed, but the understanding we gained while seeking them. Every person who witnessed those 2 days at Pinnacle Electronics carries the story with them, a permanent reminder that every human encounter is an opportunity to either diminish or enhance someone else's dignity, and that our choice reveals everything about our character. The homeless man who was thrown out for looking dirty didn't just buy the store the next day. He bought something far more precious: the chance to prove that how we treat the least among us defines who we really are. If this story moved you, if it challenged you to examine your own assumptions about the people you encounter every day, then subscribe to top_life_stories for more powerful tales that reveal the extraordinary humanity hidden in ordinary moments. Because sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected teachers, and the greatest transformations begin with the courage to admit we were wrong.